Good morning.
Hi, is anybody there?
Good morning, Ken. How are you?
How are you, Steve? Thank you.
Welcome back.
Harvey, are you there? Harvey Greenberg. Any, said 3 participants. Steve, that's you and I is only 2. Who's the third?
I'm not sure.
Okay. All right. Okay. Question is where we should begin. Thank you, Zeb.
Sorry to hear about your mother.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. It was anticipated, but you know what, a fakrektik, you know, it was a little bit more drawn out than we expected.
So sorry for your loss.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, well, the guys are getting there. Nasharait, Seida Derech, right? Right. I want to be Hakaras Hatov and acknowledge my great appreciation to Ruvain and to Michael, both of them who helped to continue the shiur while I was away. We anticipated, or we thought it was going to be something imminent, and that's why we left. And okay, and it was a little bit more drawn out, and I think we had to rebook ourselves 3 times. So that was what the situation. Okay. All right, time-wise, we're going to get underway. I don't know if you followed my practice. It's not written in stone, of course, but let me begin with the learning sponsors. Okay. A Year of Learning by Sue and Arnie Garelick in memory of Malka Pro Man and Philip Mann and Yisrael David Ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Beryl Ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Meir Ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, and Rivka Pro Rosner Bas Arav Tzvi Hirsch, in memory of family murdered in the Holocaust. Arav Tzvi Hirsch Ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah Bat Ephraim, Yisrael David Ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim Ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia Bat Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam Bat Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel Bat Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom Ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov Ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel Ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch. Marsha Federbush and family in memory of her husband, Dr. Uriel Paul Federbush, Uriel Pinchas Ben Arav Shimon, Sharon and Fred Liska, their family and many friends, in memory of her dear mom, Harriet Friedman Edel Bas Yaakov, Leslie and Gail Kaplan, in memory of their parents, Harry and Marjorie Sedell, and Irving and Pearl Kaplan, friends of Avi Gitler, Avram Meir Ben Shimon, and Martha Gitler Charna Bat Yeshaya, children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of Toby Paris, Sarah Tova Bat Yisrael Dov in her memory, friends of Joe Wolf, Yosef Ben Chaim, Charlie Gelfenstein, and Sam Levine in memory of Ramona Levine, Rachel Mata Bat Asher. Also have a month of learning by Phyllis and Chaim Reese in memory of her mother, Malka Bat Ze'ev, by Sam and Shifra Coleman in memory of his mother, Sarah Rachel Bas Avrav Avraham, by Charlie Gelfenstein in memory of his mother, Dacia Gidl Bas Meir Halevi, and their dear friend, Susan Wertman, Chaya Sarah Bat Alta Yosef, by Boca Babes, and Chaim and Phyllis Reese, by memory of his father, Mordechai Ben Yom Tov Lipa. Have a week of learning by Clara and Jonas Wazer, in memory of her mother, Chana Bat Getzel. Today being the 1st of November, Marvin is not here, I see this morning. Okay. By Shirley and Marvin Weinstein in memory of her mother, Sarah Liba Babat Yeshaya Velvo. Also passed were days of learning by Jesse and Sarah Marilis. That was yesterday, by Moshe Kranzler, also yesterday. All right. And Shema's having Aliyah, Crank Rafia, Vati Yeshira Shem Atzliah, L'chol B'nai Israel, good Gebench Jar. Okay. I'm just surprised that I didn't remember how to say that, you know? Okay.
You weren't practicing?
I was attending a shiur. I wasn't giving the shiur. The fellow when I'm in Israel and I'm staying with my son and daughter-in-law in Ramat Beit Shemesh, I go to a certain shul where I go to an 8 o'clock davening and then a 9 o'clock shiur, and the shiur is given in English. Okay, no.
They actually give you enough time to daven there?
What?
You said 8 and 9.
8 o'clock is they start at Rabbi Yishmael. Okay, and so then they usually finish about 9:15 then on a non-Torah reading day. So it's a pretty, in any case, I'm going to just have a start, if that's okay, with Kaf Bet Amud Beis, okay, in the bottom with the Gemara, okay? And as I always say, those who, since I'm just getting back into, okay, those who feel they can give positive contributions are appreciated, but I do like to ask that they be recognized, okay? All right. I'm sure Ruvain and Michael explained to you the difference between a Chodesh Chaser and a Chodesh Maleh. Number one. That was just a quick review. Number two, Gemara has been seen the problem of what do we do with certain months like, let's say the month before Tishrei, the end of Elul, what happens in that situation where the last day of Elul, okay, what happens before Nisan, okay, and Adar. Again, that's a problematic situation. These are issues because in my explanation, I would say you're dealing with not only topics that apply to the whole requirement, ideally of having the new month announced specifically based on visualization, okay? L're'iyah, it says the Gemara else some places, okay? But also you have to deal with two elements of I'll say for the moment, ibur, okay? Elements of adding. Either you're going to deal with adding a day, some months, or the whole question of adding a whole month in other situations. So these are the behind the issues, some of the issues that came to my mind as we're working on this Gemara. Okay, and then the Gemara now in this new parak wanted us to understand what was the process of how it was done. Okay, now that meant not simply, as we're going to just quickly look at, how did they wave the torches or the bunches of wood or things like that, but what was the whole process of interviewing, I'll call it, the witnesses, and we're going to get to that as well. So starting Kuf Bet, Amud Beis, towards the bottom where the Gemara is, my mashma. What do we mean when we say demasein? That this idea of lighting up, let's say, lishna dikurhu, that this is language in terms of lighting, putting on fire, things like that, right? Dechtiv, because it says, v'yasem David v'nashav, citing a pasuk there, right? So what happens? Umatargamin, and the Onkelos translate is Zva'ok Dinan David, that David kindled. Okay, so that gives us an understanding that if the Onkelos already tells us that that's the term, that's how we get that meaning of the word Messi'in. However, what happens? Ve'emata, right? So then the Gemara wants us to understand Tanu Rabbanan, and we have a Braita. Ein Masi'in Mesu'ot Ela HaChodesh Shenir'eh Bizmano L'Kadsho. So this Braita already includes a very clear statement that we don't light up these torches, these bundles of wood, except on a month, number one, that has been seen in its appropriate time and declared sanctified. So we're talking clear, right? The 30th day of the outgoing month. Okay, that's what it's pointed, what it wants us to understand. Veimatai, right? So what happens? Veimatai masin, and when do they do this? L'or iburo, okay? Preceding the occasion when they would add on, right, to it. L'memra, yeah. Okay, we'll
The
get to.
night of the 30th.
It's the eve of the 31st.
Correct, the
Right.
night of the 30th.
The eve of the 31st day. So that's what it means. Okay, so now it's Lamemra, the Achaser of Dinan, Amale Lo of Dinan. That on a month that is incomplete, we could use other terms for it, but incomplete I think is sufficient. We do it, okay? On a month that is full, all right? In other words, incomplete being 29 days, full meaning 30 days, right? Amale Lo of Dinan, on a full month, we don't do it. My Tama, what's the reasoning? Amar Rabbi Zera, says Rabbi Zera, Zera Mishum Rosh Chodesh Chaser. Why? Because perhaps we would come to a situation where we would have a Rosh Chodesh in a month that is incomplete. Shechaliot be'erev Shabbat, and it's going to occur on when? Friday, Erev Shabbos. Ema Avdei. So the Gemara says, well, I would say, why don't they do it? Right? Ba'afuke Shabta. Why don't they do it on Motzei Shabbos? Do it then. We all know you can't light the on Shabbos, right? So what happens? De'i amart na'avid nami amalei, because if you were to say that they would also do this, uh, these bonfires, okay? Let's use that term. I think that clarifies it a little bit more, right? Okay, signal fires, bonfires on months that are also complete months, right? What happens? Says the Gemara as we go over to today's daf, Atulamatai, they might come to make a mistake, right? Amre, people might say as follows, right? Hi chaser who, maybe it was a incomplete month. Vahai delo avid me etmol, and the fact they didn't do it from the day before, mishum delo efshar, maybe because it simply wasn't possible, because it was Erev Shabbos, right? Right? Oh, Dilma, or perhaps Malehu, perhaps it's a full month, a complete month. Ubizmano avdu, and they did it, therefore, on the appropriate time when it was supposed to be said. So the Gemara raises another question. V'le'avad beina male u'beina chaser. So let's say they should do it regardless of whether it is a complete month or an incomplete month, right? V'ki makle rav chodesh be'erev Shabbat. And in a situation, as we were just describing, when it would occur that Rosh Chodesh came out on Friday, right, Erev Shabbos, Lola Aved Kla, so they simply wouldn't do it on that occasion. That's all. V'kevan de lo avdinin motzei Shabbat, and since they then wouldn't do it also on Motzei Shabbos, Saturday night, va'avdinin amale, and they would do it then on a full month, complete month, Meidei Yadei de Chaserhu, that then they would seem to know that it was a incomplete month. Okay, and in that case, they might think, well, wait a second, is it right, beyond their control? Whatever, we'll see, hold on. All right, so therefore the problem with this, so why about that suggestion? Gemara answers and tells us, afilu hachi atu limitai. Even in this case, they might come to make a mistake. Why? Amre, people might say, hi malehu, okay, v'hai delo avde. This was a complete month, a full month, but they didn't do it. Why? It nusehu de it nuse. Maybe it was beyond, they were honest, it was beyond their control. Okay? By the way, Rashi's interesting here. He says, what happens? Maybe they got drunk, intoxicated because of the meal on the Friday night. And maybe they think, okay, interesting approach from Rashi. He comes back to something else we'll talk about when I give my shir on Rashi this year. All right, Rosh Chodesh, we'll see what happens. Anyway, so go on. V'li avad amale v'lo li'avad achasek klal. So again, let us say do it on a full month, and we'll not do it on a month that is incomplete whatsoever. Va'amar Abaye. However, Abaye now comes forward and says as follows. Right? Mishum bitul malacha la'am shnei yamim. Okay, that it's possible that they might not do it because you could have an occasion where the people would have to refrain from work for 2 days. Rashi's point here being, by the way, Rosh Hashanah. Okay, but it would also Rosh Chodesh, right? Okay, so in that case, that's why. All right. Now, let's go on to a slightly new topic. Says the Gemara, back from our Mishnah. Ketzad hayu masi'in misaot. Okay, how did they do these bonfires, these signal fires? Mevi'in klunsaot. They would bring stacks, I'm going to say, or pieces of wood, poles of wood. Okay, now, do we want to know what kind of wood that they brought? Okay, but the Gemara is going to tell us. All right. Now, you're going to ask yourself a question: why should the Gemara have to go into such detail? Think about it for a moment as we get start to go through the Gemara. Right? Amar Rav Yehudi says, Arba mine arazim. There were 4 kinds of wood, cedar wood, that we're talking about. Erez, okay, which I'll call normal cedar wood. Katrom, which was a second kind. Eitz shemen, which we're going to call pine wood. Okay, uverosh.
Eitz shemen is balsam.
Okay, well, right. And another, well, that's one translation, right? That's Sard Scrolls.
Because there's another word.
Uverosh, right, is cypress. Okay. Now, katrom, what about this katrom? Amarav, adra. Okay. He says that's that kind of. Debay Rebbe Shila Amre Mavliga. They said it was that kind of. Va'amre la zo gumish. And they said no, others say it was gumish tree. Okay. Upliga the Rabba Bar Bar Rav Huna. And this was an argument with Rabba Bar Bar Huna. Excuse me. Da'amar Rabba Bar Bar Huna. He said Amre Barab, and he said according to Beirab, Asara. You said there were 4 kinds of cedar. No, we've got a source that tells us there were more than that, 10 varieties of cedar. Asara mine arazim hem, right? Shneamar. Okay, citing a pasuk. Atain b'medbar erez shita v'hadas ve'etz shemen ashim ba'arava b'rosh tidhar v'ta'ashur yachdav. Okay, what are they? Erez is arza, regular cedar. Shita, tornita, that's an acacia tree. Hadas, myrtle, is asa. Eitz shemen, okay, my translation had pine tree, okay. A farsim, it's oily wood, right? Okay, birosh, right? We said again that was cypress. Barta, tidhar, okay, that was maple. Sha'aga, ta'ashur, that was a box tree, right? Shurivna, okay? Hani shiva havu, but according to this, the pasuk only lists 7, right? Ki ata Rav Dimi, when Rav Dimi came in, he said, Hosifu alehem alonim almogin almonim almogim. They added on these 3. They added to these 7 3 other kinds. Okay, one was called an alon, right, tree. One was called an almon tree, and one was an almog, a coral tree. Now we're going to get into a side discussion as to about the coral industry.
Well, first you have to mispronounce the word.
Okay, so what happens?
Ration, not lamed.
Okay, alonim butmei, almonim blute, almogim ksita. Okay, so those again were the other names that they were known. Now, ikeda amre, and there are those who say aronim, armonim. Okay, almogin, aronin. All right. Okay, and then we have what? Right. All right. We have so that one would be the bay tree, one would be a plane tree, and then one would be coral wood. Okay, Dilve, Almogin, Ksita. Okay, now, if we get a little sidebar here, all right, we're going to go into the shipping, the coral industry. V'tzi adir lo ya'avirenu. All right, we hear here a pasuk, okay, that tells us, right, that what happens. Amar Rav. How do we understand this pasuk? Si adir lo yavirenu, that this won't pass. Okay, he says as follows: Zo burne gedola. This is a special kind of large ship. Actually, Koren suggests it was similar to a warship. Larger than that actually, because okay, but could be of that variety. It was a ship by which they could then fill it, as we're going to see in a moment, with sand, which would then sink the ship, right? So the Gemara continues. Heichi avde, how did they do this, right? Maitu sheet alfe gavre Betreser Yarche Shata. They would bring 6,000 men, okay, and they would work, right, for trace, right, 12 months for the year. In other words, it was a corvée system, forced labor. Va'amrela, and others say, Tresar Alfe Gavre, that they would bring in 12,000 men, Bishita Yarche Shata, and they would work for 6 months. Right? In either case, Vitane, and what would they do? Then they would load la chala, they would load the ship with sand, ad shachna, until it sank. V'nachet, and it would go down to the bottom, bar amorai, okay, to the bottom of the area. V'katar atune, right, dikitna bekasita, and then they would tie, okay, using flax ropes, the coral to the ship, okay, and then what would happen? V'katar lahobasvina, tie it to the ship. V'natal not lechala, then they would send a diver down, okay, and they would remove the sand, okay, and the flax ropes from the ship were tied to the coral, okay, and when the ship rose, okay, it would pull up the coral.
No environmentalists.
What?
No environmentalists.
Uh-huh. Vishadu labrai, and they would bring it up, right? All right, and they would, okay, they toss the sand overboard, right? Right, and they say vikama midalaye akra, okay, and at that point, right, they would bring it. It would bring it up, right? Okay, the ship would rise, and it would pull up the coral, right? So what would happen then? Umatya, umachlif al-chad tarin bekaspa. And this coral was so valuable, yes, according to the Gemara, that it was sometimes worth twice as much as silver. Okay, so what happens? Then the Gemara tells us, Tzlat Parvata Havian. There were these 3 ports from which were bases for this, right? Tarte Be Romai, 2 belonged under Roman control. All right. Okay. All right. V'chada de Be Parsai, and 1 was under Persian control. Art Scroll says Aramean.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's interesting because Koran did not.
Are.
Okay, I understand that. I'm just saying Koran did not go with that. It said it was Roman. Okay, all I'm just saying is the implication for us very quickly is that it was interesting that these foreign countries control the ports for this industry.
Well, this was north. This was by.
Mhm. Right. Okay. The Bay,
Was this at the Mediterranean? Or?
Yeah. It should have been Lebanon.
right? And then the Bay Romai, Maskan Ksita. The Bay Parsai, Maskan Marganita. Now this tells us something further. Those ports that were under Aramean or Roman control, okay, they were the ones that did the coral. The one port that was under Persian control, they brought up pearls. Okay, Umakarye Parvata Damish Mahig, and they called it the royal port. Okay, now we're going to finally get back to a little bit more closer to our topic. Amar Rabbi Yochanan kol shita v'shita shenat lu goyim Yerushalayim. Every kind of tree, whether it's an oak or a terebinth or whatever, okay, that was removed by the Gentiles from the area of Jerusalem, okay, Atid HaKadosh Baruch Hu lahachziran la, that ultimately the Kadosh Baruch Hu returned those trees. Okay, so he would be the model for JNF, okay, that they would, right? Okay, Shanam, well, maybe they got the idea from here. All right, Shanamar, as it says, attain b'midbar erez shita ve'ein midbar ela Yerushalayim, that I planted in the desert, in the wilderness, let's use that term, okay, these trees, and there is no wilderness except Jerusalem, Why? It says, Shneamar Tzion Midbar Haita Lagomer. Okay? Just a quick personal story. One of the first times we brought our kids to Israel, all right? The youngest son at the time that was with us decided he wanted to bring an Israeli pine cone back from Israel. Don't you know what happened?
They confiscate.
They can't, right? When they went through customs, you can't bring any kind of agricultural products into the States. They wouldn't let him bring it in. Okay? But I always remember that. Now, of course, he lives in Israel now. I learned of it. All the pine cones you want.
Pines.
Right. V'amar Rabbi Yochanan. Kol halomed Torah ve'eno melamda. One who says, according to Rabbi Yochanan, who learns Torah and doesn't transmit it to others. Okay. Domeh lahadas b'midbar. He is like this kind of myrtle in the desert. Why? Because then there's no one who can benefit from the smell from the eye. That's the point of the Gemara. Ikata Amre, and there are those who say also, Kol halomei Torah u'melamda b'makom she'ein talmidei chachamim, in a place where he teaches, and there aren't others, okay, to learn, other students and scholars. Domeh lahadas b'midbar dechaviv. Okay, he is like, again, a myrtle in the desert that is precious. V'amar Rabbi Yochanan, oy lahem le'umot she'ein lahem takana. Woe to those nations that don't have any remedy. Okay, as it says, v'tachet ha'nechoshet, avi zahav, v'tachet ha'barzel, avi kesef, v'tachet ha'etzim nechoshet, v'tachet ha'avanim barzel. Okay, citing a pasuk, in place of the copper, I'll bring zahav, gold. In place of barzel, okay, I'll bring silver. In place of the trees, I'll also bring copper. In place of the stone, etc. V'tachet Rabbi Akiva. So in other words, Hashem will provide some replacement, okay, when things have been removed from the Jewish people that are of value. Okay, what's the next example? Tachet Rabbi Akiva v'chavei Rav. What about the sages that were killed by the Romans? Okay, what happened to Mai V'yeh? What is Mavi Mivim? What is he going to bring? Va'alehum hu'amer, and about them it says v'niketi damam lo niketi. Okay, citing the pasuk. Uman. Okay, ume'ayin hayu masi'im. Where did they display these bonfires? Okay, what was the path? Okay, Corin I don't know if Art Scroll has a map. Okay, I didn't have a chance to look at Art Scroll, but Corin had a map showing that went from Har Habayit, okay, to a couple of other mountaintops fairly not close by. And then there was a distance where from those mountaintops, they would be able to see them all the way towards Pompadita. We will see in a moment. All right. So where did they bring them? May Beit Balatin. What do we mean when we say Beit Balatin? That mountain, Amarav, as we go over quickly, Zo Biram. That's the location of the city of Biram. Mai Gola, what was that section? Amar Rav Yosef, says Rosef, Zo Pompadita. Okay, so that was the location of Pompadita. So they were geared to send the signal fires in that direction above. Mai Kimedurata Ish. So what do we mean by these bonfires? Tana. It's taught in the Braita. Kol echad v'echad notel avuka. Each one would take a torch. Biado v'oleh l'rosh gago. Okay. So why did it say that in Pompadita it was like multiple sources of fire, right? Because each person, when they would go up on his rooftop, okay, with his own torch, and they would wave Va'oleh l'rosh gago. Tanya, and taught in the Braita, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer. Af, all right? Okay, also he says, Harim, v'chier, v'gader, v'chavrute. Also, there were these other locations, okay, Harim, and
Between the
all right,
ones.
which was theoretically between the last stop on near the going towards the coast of Israel, between there and the first location, Pompadita, okay, in. Now, why was that possible? Remember, Eretz Yisrael had mountains, Pompadita was flat, okay? So, okay, even though it was on the river, all right? Af Harim and its surroundings. Ikeda Amre, and there were others who said Bene Havu Kame, that there were other places along the way.
These were between.
They were
the
between,
missions.
they're different places. Kame. Ikeda Amre and Lahach Gisa Eretz Yisrael Havu Kame, that there were those who say it went for one direction from Eretz Yisrael in one direction. Mar, okay, Yisrael Havi Kame, Mar Chashiv the High Gisa, or Mar Chashiv the High Gisa. And others say no, that went to one direction and also went out to another direction. Okay, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, he says as follows. Okay, Bein Kol Echad ve'Echad Shmona Parsa. That if we accept the idea that there were intermediate locations, what was the distance between them? 8 parsecs. Kama havulaho, how far were they? Right, Platin utartin, they were 32. Okay, so in other words, that was the area, okay, between each. Vaha ha'idna tu vahavu. But now you're saying today, that people are telling him, the distance between there and Pompadita is much farther. Why is that the case? More than that, Amar Abai says Abai, istatume istatum lahodarche, that the routes have been blocked up. Okay, and there is no straight direct route, that it's more circuitous. Okay, Dichtiv, as it's written, lachein hineni sach et darchecha basiri. Right. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar, Mehacha dichtiv. It says from here, Netivotai Ava. That's the case. All right, our new Mishnah. Since we dealt with how they did the signals, fires, we now want to focus on what was the situation with the witnesses themselves. Okay, Matnitin, says our Mishnah, Chatzah Gedolah Hayta b'Yerushalayim. There was a large courtyard in Jerusalem, Ubeit Ya'azek Hayta Nikreit, and it was called either Beit Yazik or Beit Ya'azek. All right, I can't pronounce the ayin, but you understand that there would be a slight difference in pronunciation. Okay, Ulasham Kol Ha'idim Mitkansim, and all the witnesses that came that are claiming that they saw the moon, right, visually, okay, assemble there. Exactly. Ubeit din bodkino tam sham, and the court examines them there. Usudot gdoloto sim lehem b'shvil shehiu regilin lavo, and they used to make large banquets for them so that they would get used to the idea of, hey, I get a free meal, I'll come and testify. Okay. Barishana lo hayu zazin misham kol hayom. Since the issue was that for coming to give the testimony, they could be mechalel Shabbos, but now that they were there, they should not be further mechalel Shabbos. Originally, they couldn't leave that courtyard. Itkin Rabban Gamliel has a cane, and he made a takana, Rabban Sheyu Mahalchin al Payam Amal Lechol Ruach, that from the courtyard they could go a tchum, right? Tchum, okay, within the city limits. All right, is that how you understood it? The whole city? Okay, we'll get it. V'lo elo bilvad, and not only these, ela af, okay, and likewise, who else? Chachama, a midwife who comes to help give birth. V'haba lahatzil min hadleika. These are what we would call first responders. All right, a fireman who comes to steal from a fire, umin hagais, okay, one who comes to save the community from troops, foreign troops, umin hanahar, or from a flood, umin hamapolet, or from an earthquake. Hare elu ka'anshe ha'ir, they are considered like people of that community, and therefore yesh lahem alpayim l'chol ruach.
So that's
And
why I said.
so that's why now that's what tells us that they have the vicinity of that location plus the tchum from that location. Okay, Gemara Ibayalaho. So they asked, Beit Yaazek Tanan, was it taught Beit Yaazek with the ayin, or Beit Yazik Tanan, or was it taught without the ayin? Beit Yazik Tanan, if it's taught with the ayin, okay, Lishna Ma'al Yahu. That's significant, important, good language. Tichtiv, why? Because it says Vayas Kehu, Vayasal Kehu. Okay, he's citing a pasuk that then tells us it was to benefit. O Dilma Beit Yazik Tanan, or perhaps it was without the ayin, and therefore what would have happened? Lishna de Tzarahu. That is negative, right? Negative language, right? Unbeneficial. Kedichtiv v'hu asur ba'azikim. Right? In that case, Amar Abaye says, Abaye Tashma, listen to udot gedolot hayu osim lahem. Great meals, right? They had a good caterer. Sham kadesh yehu regilim lavo dilma tarte havu avdei baho. Okay, why would they make the meals? Right, because they would say that they, right, that so they would not only come again, but they would be more than one person coming.
Yeah, both lashonas are appropriate.
Right.
There's one, the negative is before the takana, when they would be stuck there, they would be chained.
Yeah.
And the other implication is they had a great deal to eat. So the Gemara ends up with, you're going to say either term justifies.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Interesting comment. Thank you. Matnit Nanu Mishnah. Okay. Kesad Budkinet Ha'edim. How did they investigate? How did they interview them? Zug Shabarishon Budkinoto Rishon. The first pair of witnesses that arrived were interviewed first. Umachnisin et hagadol shebahen, and they would bring in the senior of the two, right? Va'omrin lo, and they would say to them, Emor kitzad ra'ita talavana. Tell us how you saw the moon. Lifnei hachama or lachar hachama. Was it before the sun or after the sun? All right, we'll get into this in more detail in just a couple minutes. What does that mean? Litzfona or lidroma? Was it in the north or was it in the south? Kama hayagva, how high was it? Ula'an havanota, in what direction was it leaning? Kama hayarachav, how wide was it? Im amar lifnei achama lo amar klum. If they said that they saw the moon before the sun, okay, in other words, it was still daylight when they saw it. Theoretically, therefore, that's not like they said anything. And then they brought in the second person and they examined him. They interviewed him and they said, if their testimonies were valid, edutan kayemet, then their testimony is acceptable and valid. What about all the other pairs? Shoalinotan rashed varim. They would ask them, just some general questions, right? Right? Not that they needed their testimony. So they didn't walk out disappointed, down-faced, so to speak. All right? So that they will be used to coming. All right? Na Gemara, Hainu lifnei chama. But when we say before the sun, right? Hainu litzafona, wouldn't that be towards the north? Hainu la'achar hachama, when we say that was after the sun, right? Hainu lidroma, that would be more in the south, all right? Amar Abayis. So Abayis is something here which, again, I didn't have access to Art Scroll. Whether Art Scroll has pictures at this
Yeah.
point, it should have.
It does.
Okay, Corin did also. Pagimata lifnei hachama. If the concave side of the moon, okay, was which side? After,
Direction it is,
right? In the direct question of sun. Im amar lifnei hachama. If they then said it was before, okay, right? Lo amar klum. Then it was like they said nothing. The amar Rabbi Yochanan, as Rabbi Yochanan says, my dichtiv, what does it mean when it says in the pasuk? Hamashal upachad amo oseh shalom bimromav, me'olam lo ra'ata chama pagimata shalavana, v'lo pagimata shel keshet. Okay, citing the pasuk that they never saw the concave side of the moon or the concave side of a rainbow.
Never pointed toward the sun.
Okay, right. So why? Okay. Pagimata shalavana. What about the concave side of the moon? Dechalsha data. Okay. He said that what would happen? That it would be one would be distressed. Pagimata shel keshet, the concave side of the rainbow. Delo limdu ovde hachama. So that those who are sun worshippers will not come and say as follows, Gire ka mishdaye, that it's like they were the shooting
The
arrows.
concave side
right?
is facing
So-
the
So the
archer.
question is, if you think of the curve, it's like a bow, all right? And therefore, if the bow, okay, is in that direction, it would be just like somebody
The
shooting
sun
an
is
arrow.
shooting at you.
Sun is shooting at them. So we'll stop right there in the top of Kaf Daled, and that's where we'll pick up tomorrow. All right? Okay,
Thank
everybody.
you. Good to have you back, Ken.
Glad to have you back.
I'm sure you guys. Take care.
Thank you.